repeats?
Yeah.
We can wait a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Sounds great.
And then we stop there.
I'm gonna write that. So wait, I just do it in my head. So it goes like this, repeats, goes this, repeats, this, repeats, this. Sorry, this is kind of silly. And then it repeats to here, and then that, all the way to there. No repeats. Beautiful. That's probably gonna be all we're gonna play for the first. But if they need more, we do this. We don't need to play this, right?
No.
We start it.
Yeah.
A few measures. This one we both know how it goes. All right, and this does have another page or two even. Cute.
With more repeats, but no
Let's see.
da capo.
Right. That's it, all the way to the end. All right, cool. And then there's the talk. Then they have a coffee break, which we may play this, or may play the first thing, or may rest. I think we should play one thing on the coffee break. And then that would bring us to 5 songs if we do play on the coffee break. And then at the end, we're gonna do this. 4, and then this. And then we go here. I'm gonna use the bathroom. Yeah, we have time. Probably 10:30.
for a decade. Really hope you're going to enjoy the conversations. Really hope you're going to be able to connect with some of the very interesting folks that are part of this community. Houston Oasis is a community of compassion and reason. Started in 2012. We've been meeting every Sunday to hear interesting talks, listen to local musicians, and enjoy connecting with each other in this community. Our members hail from across the globe, across all walks of life, so I'm sure you'll be able to find some interesting folks to have conversations with. Our 5 core values are right over there. I tend to vary which one of those happens to be my favorite. Maybe meaning comes from making a difference for today. It is really finding the thing you're passionate about and helping each other live better, more connected, more interesting lives. So, and that is, as a community, as humans, I think we all like to hang out with each other, connect with each other, and feel like we're part of a larger community that makes things happen. Speaking of making things happen, I think Will has pointed out to me that he has brought voter registrations. So meaning also and making a difference also comes from voting. So if you're not registered yet and you're eligible to register, please, you can do so here today. I'm really excited about today's programming. We're going to have hear music from a fantastical classical string duo. Some of you may have heard them as you were walking around. Lexi and Augusta are going to be playing for us today as we start off and as we close today. And in between, we're going to listen to a screenside chat between Dr. Will Judy and Dr. Anthony Pinn. And we'll, after coffee break, we'll do Q&A with them then as well. So. One other thing today is bring your own lunch, right? Every second and fourth Sunday of the month, Houston Oasis does bring your own lunch after the programming concludes, and it's just another opportunity for all of us to hang together. If you did not bring any lunch, don't worry about it. Please stick around. Several of us have brought food, and we will also be ordering pizza and food so that everybody can stay and have lunch here. The other days when we don't do bring your own lunch, just as an FYI, we typically go out to a local restaurant to connect there as well. So, or if you have special requirements and you want to order food, just have it delivered here in time for our 12 o'clock lunch. With that, let's go ahead and listen to Lexi and Augusta and their classical music.
Hello, everyone. We're really excited to be here with you guys today. As she said, I'm Lexi, this is Augusta, and we're both graduates of the Shepherd School of Music at Rice and are now based here in Houston. Yes, really excited to be in Houston. And we're part of a larger group called the Vino Quartet, String Quartet. Today we're here as a duo, just bringing you arrangements of some of the best melodies from the classical music era. We're both really passionate. She said passion, so we're both really passionate about music and classical music in particular, and really want to bring it to a lot of rooms it doesn't normally reach. So without further ado, please enjoy.
Thank you all so much. What a treat. I wanted to thank an individual who's oftentimes not in this room because he's staffing the kids' room as well, Pete. He's a board member. He is the one responsible for organizing the music, etc. And it's always a joy to hear what he brings in. It's very diverse music, and today is certainly a very special treat. So thank you both, Lexi and Augusta, for being here, and many thanks to Pete. So if you see him in the hallway, feel free to thank him for that as well. All right, on to our main feature of today, the screenside chat between Dr. Anthony Pinn and Dr. Will Judy. Just a quick intro on Dr. Pinn. Anthony B. Pinn is a distinguished scholar and professor with a PhD from Harvard University. In 2003, he became the first African American to hold an endowed chair at Rice University, where he currently serves as the Agnes Cullen Arnold Distinguished Professor of Humanities and Religion. Pinn founded the Houston Enriches Rice Education Project, which evolved into the Center for Engaged Research and Collaborative Learning. He also established the doctoral concentration in African American religion at Rice, contributing significantly to the field and fostering community engagement through various initiatives. An award-winning author, Pinn's influential works include Why Lord? Suffering and Evil in Black Theology, which positions African American humanism as a vital non-theistic orientation. His scholarship encompasses themes of liberation theologies, black religious aesthetics, and the intersection of religion and popular culture. He has published nearly 30 monographs, edited volumes, and serves in leadership roles across several academic and community organizations, including the Smithsonian's Religion Advisory Board. Pinn is recognized as a leading expert in African American religion and was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2021, highlighting his significant contributions to scholarship. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Anthony Pinn.
Check 1, 2. Oh, yeah. Hot mic. That's nice. All right. So yeah, great introduction. Wonderful music. Thank you all. Thank you both. So yeah, Dr. Pinn kind of quickly said, yeah, I'll talk to you all, but I don't want to do a podium thing. I kind of want to have an easy, casual conversation about his new book, out now, The Black Practice of Disbelief. And in case y'all don't know, he is a superstar in the humanist world. And we're going to be talking specifically about black humanism and how it relates in the book, and kind of generally about humanism as well. So, yeah, let's get this conversation started.
Let's do it.
Kind of want to start off with the topic of.
You have papers.
I have papers. I have notes. Yeah, because I'm not a natural interviewer, but this is a conversation, not an interview. There's a strong association between being a black American with being a black Christian in this country. That's something that we've heard for forever. And it's something, since I've been in this world, I hear a lot of. So that's kind of the first thing I want to unpack. Pew Research says differently. Just like Americans in general are leaving religion, black Americans are as well. So there's evidence toward that. And then here we are, two black humanists up here also kind of bucking that trend. So unpack that, please. This is right, your cue to kind of say what you know about that association between being a black American and a black Christian.
First, good morning. Good morning. Great to be with you again. It's been a minute. I think the last time was Zoom during COVID. So good to see you face to face again. Yeah, that is the typical association. And for me, it boils down to this. You find what you're looking for. So we assume a particular orientation. So of course, that's what we find. Anything else is considered marginal, not worth the time or attention. And black churches have had tremendous PR. And so we've assumed that institutional form was not only vital, but necessary. That there is no way to think about the longevity of black communities, the ability to survive some really nasty stuff without the infrastructure that these churches provide. But again, you find what you're looking for. And so we've tended to look at U.S. history assuming a certain relationship to supernatural conversations, and so that is what we find. It's also the case that there's poor thinking in terms of African Americans in more general terms, right? The assumption that black folks are more emotional than intellectual, yeah? More driven by affective concerns than by intellectual inquiry. So this church thing makes sense, but not just any kind of church thing. The assumption is that black folks involved in church are jumping around, screaming and shouting, right? That there's a certain type of religious orientation that is black. And so it's extremely difficult, right? So you've got theists who, of course, look at African American history and they see the church. But non-theists look at black history and see the church. The number of times, I wish I had $1 for each time a humanist has come up to me over the past 31 years and said, well, you know, we understand that we don't have very many blacks in our communities, but you have to understand that humanism is deeply intellectual, it's philosophical, and so it's harder for, yeah, $1 for each time. So it's not just theists who look at black communities and see church. Non-theists look at black people and see church. But if the question becomes, rather than how are black folks associated with Christianity, if our question becomes, when we look at black communities, the history of black communities, if our question is, what are the ways in which black people have survived anti-blackness? If that's the general question, then you see a variety of alternatives. Then you not only hear the spirituals, you hear the blues. And the blues are decidedly against the supernatural claims that theists were making. Whereas theists were concerned with vertical relationships, right? The human relationship to something that is bigger, is grander. The blues are concerned with horizontal relationships, the material stuff of our life. And so pleasure becomes a major concern within the blues, not for shock value, but because something about our ability to give and to receive pleasure as material beings says something about our integrity, our worth. If you ask that question rather than how have black folks been associated with Christianity, then you hear the voices of skeptics who are present throughout the history of black people within the context of the United States. You get a much richer, a much thicker, a much more complex understanding. And Pew makes this undeniable, right? They make it undeniable. And for Pew, if you think about black communities from the late 20th century to the present, you have a growth in the number of black folks who are willing to say, no, these theistic communities, that's not for me. I don't do that. And those who do claim some sense of connection, it's rather limited. There's church attendance. Now, what they don't ask is this church attendance on Mother's Day, Christmas, Easter? Or it's a kind of vague nod in the direction of prayer. But it's also the case for me that while I celebrate what Pew is telling us about folks like us, I'm still a bit suspicious of these surveys, right? Because think about it. You're talking to folks who experience at least double jeopardy. For black women, it's triple jeopardy. Now, how willing are you going to be to take on yet another form of disregard publicly? Regardless of how you live your life, how willing are you going to be to publicly take on another form of disregard, to be despised because you're black, to suffer because of class, to suffer because of gender, and now you're going to add publicly another form of disregard? I don't know. So it seems to me that what Pew and others are telling us, this is useful, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And I'll say this one last thing, then we'll move on to your next question. If you think just in terms of the black church, black churches experience a decline in membership post-civil rights movement, right? Christianity in the United States in general experiences a decline post-civil rights movement. Black churches experience a decline post-civil rights movement. It's not until the 1980s that there's an uptick. And this uptick reflects to a significant degree of movement back into churches by the black middle class. These are folks who had been told, speak right, live in the right neighborhoods, get the right jobs, go to the right schools, have the right friends, and all of this can be yours, only to find out that racism remained real. And on top of all of this, they had surrendered social and cultural connections. And they moved back into these churches because these are spaces where you don't have to explain why you're angry. These are spaces where no one's going to touch your hair without permission. These are spaces where you can catch your breath. And if the sermon is the price you pay for that space, you pay it. So it's an unsafe assumption that 1980s moving forward, an uptick in black church membership means a deep embrace of theism. These are social and cultural spaces that allow for useful networking. And again, if the sermon is the price you pay for that space, pay it and keep it moving. Right? Because the question that's going to be asked in the context of that church is, are you tithing? Not how much of the pastor's sermon do you believe? So we don't know. We know that these numbers are growing as more black folks are willing to say, yeah, me, I don't do this stuff. But that doesn't, from my mind, adequately account for the actual number of African Americans who are non-theist.
I want to go back to what you said about survival. I've thought about that in learning about history, about enslaved people, and they were brought over here, and in those early days, I think they realized we don't get hit as much. We get a little bit better treatment if we play the game with this religion thing. Oh yeah, I'm saved, and they get treated better, so survival. The Tulsa Massacre, I heard a story of this is in early 1900s, if y'all don't know, a thriving black community. White people got jealous, came in and just burned it all down, just kind of killed people in their houses. Very sad story. But there was one particular story that made me think about this, that a black man was, I think, shot and injured in the bedroom, and they came in to finish the job, and his wife was over him crying, saying prayers, Jesus, God, and the two white men were Christians, so all of a sudden, he was one of them. He was humanized, and they didn't shoot. They didn't kill him, so they left because of that. So again, I know it's anecdotal, but I'm sure there's some kind of statistics to this survival thing you just spoke of. And the blues, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm a huge blues fan.
I know you are.
Yeah, I was a guitarist in a band for a while.
I see your post.
Yeah, blues is my thing, and to know it was like a counterpoint to this whole vertical thing that you speak of. This is the real world. This is not this supernatural stuff. This is the real life. Yeah, that's. I was really glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you put that in the book. And the next question I want to unpack, and this kind of has to do with us here, Oasis in general, but also to Black humanism. In your book, you really make a terrific argument of religion versus theism. And I want you to unpack this because it kind of has to do with our mindset here. I thought it was fascinating because it made me kind of re-examine who we are here in this room as secular humanists, really, is what kind of binds us, a lot of us together. And spoiler alert, this is going to make the argument that Oasis and humanism generally, and even Oasis specifically, is a religion. Ooh, ooh, I queued it up for you, man. Bring them home, bring them home.
I think humanists, freethinkers, skeptics misname the target of their critique. That what non-theists are really critical of is theism, and that all forms of theism are religious, but not all things that are religious are theistic. There's a distinction that has to be made. And for me, in not making that distinction, we non-theists have sacrificed too much. Look at how long it has taken us to realize the value of ritual, of the affective dimensions of our life. Think of how poorly we discuss issues of loss. You can't just put a scientific theory on that, yeah? That we have been inadequate in how we have helped folks address the more effective dimensions of our lives, the psychological and emotional dimensions of our lives, in part because we assume that's all those folks. Science is enough. We've missed out on so much. We've misnamed our own experience. Theism is about God or gods. Religion and its association with gods or gods is just one definition, right? But religion is a binding together. It does not require gods or gods. And there are a whole lot of scholars that we know but don't pay attention to who've given us other ways to think about religion. Right? You've got William James, yeah, Weber, Durkheim, Jung. All of these folks provide a way of understanding religion that revolves around how humans try to understand themselves in relationship to the world and in the world. That for all of these folks, at the end of the day, for them, religion is about a process of meaning making. And you don't have to have a god or gods to be involved in the process of meaning making. And the number of atheists and humanists have told me, we don't care about meaning. But that's just stupid, right? That makes absolutely no sense, right? To surrender the very quest for meaning to theists, game over. Drop the mic, what's left? Right? That we as non-believers are committed to making life meaningful, that we are concerned with the fundamental questions of human existence. Who are we? What are we? When are we? Why are we? We simply wrestle with those questions on a horizontal plane. And don't assume there's a hidden mystical knowledge that links it all together, that requires devotion to some sort of divine being. No, for us, it's all here. And I think for non-theists, there is or ought to be a greater comfort with uncertainty. We're wrestling with this stuff. Do we have all the answers? Nah. But we're wrestling with this stuff. And that wrestling with it in and of itself is productive, is life-affirming. And so mindful of that, the idea that religion is simply a process of meaning-making, my argument is humanists are religious. We are not theists, but we are religious. Why? Because we are involved in the process of meaning-making, and we are involved in the process of ritualizing our activity. Think about ritual as repeated activity in founded space. How often do you come here? Is there a process for your time here? That's ritual. You are ritual beings. And to the degree, something about your ritual, something about your engagement with humanism on the individual level and on the collective level, to the degree that has something to do with making life meaningful, you are religious. theists don't like to hear that, and a whole lot of non-theists don't like to hear it.
I hear a lot of squirming over here. Yeah, it makes us bristle a little bit, like, oh, because I don't have trauma from past religious experiences, but a lot of people do. So just to bring in religion to this space, people will bristle or recoil.
But again, why would we give up so much to theists simply because they say it's theirs? Now, if theists said, taking a walk along Buffalo Bayou, that's our thing. We do that. You cannot have it. Would you be okay with that? No, we can't have that. I like the bayou. But there's so much of our conceptual framework, our conceptual world, that without resistance, without struggle, we have given up to theists. And for me, this is bizarre for folks who pride themselves on critical engagement to, without thought, surrender such wonderful, awe-affirming vocabulary and grammar. I just don't understand that.
So instead of making up another word for the same thing, you're just saying, no, just accept that term. What's the upside to accepting this term religion into this space?
Yeah. Well, I think there are elements of our grammar and vocabulary that we have to get rid of that just won't serve us. But there are elements of our grammar and vocabulary that still function. And I think religion is one of those categories that still functions when we recognize a distinction between theism and religion. This still functions.
The word, the meaning,
The
definition
concept, the
of religion.
category, it still functions. For me, it names something that is still relevant to non-theists.
And you're saying theists wouldn't want us to accept, incorporate the word religion to what we do. I kind of think they'll be all glum, like, see, that's you're religious too.
Yeah, but
they won. They get the W, as the kids say.
not really, because what's missing from that equation, right? It creates a certain type of dissonance, because what's missing from that is the belief in God or gods, right? So for theists, it's like, what are you talking about? How are you religious? You don't believe in God. You don't believe in gods. But for me, this is important. It's important in of itself, but it's also important for another reason. How often have you heard the critique that if you don't believe in God, what's the basis for your moral and ethical conduct? Oprah has raised the question. Steve Harvey has raised the question. Right? Steve Harvey has told folks, look, you don't want to date an atheist because I don't know what grounds them. Yeah? Now, you may not want to take dating advice from Steve Harvey for other reasons, but this is not an unusual assumption in the context of the United States, that if you don't believe in God, there's nothing that grounds you morally and ethically. And so it seems to me, reclaiming some of this vocabulary, reclaiming some of these concepts, forces the question, gives us opportunity to name and to celebrate our moral and ethical commitments.
I'm convinced. I was convinced when I read the book. Like I'm okay with it, but it does take some time. So yeah.
It has taken 30 years.
Well, thank you for putting it so eloquently in the book. I want to kind of switch the focus to a little bit more toward Black humanism. In the book, our friend Chris Cameron, who was a speaker here about a year and a half ago, a friend of ours, he's quoted in this book as saying, quote, "New Black atheists are not content to personally reject religion, but instead have a goal of spreading free thought to the broader Black community." So that's specifically for Black humanism and Black atheism, but it can be, it can apply to Houston Oasis, a secular community as a whole. And I love it through the years, you always mention that a space like ours, an Oasis, needs to be a soft place to land for people that are questioning their religion. Again, this can apply to Black humanists or to anybody. And what do you mean by a soft place to land?
Yeah. When I started interacting with humanist and atheist communities, there was an underlying assumption that a critique of religion was enough. Right? A belittling, a mocking of the religious was sufficient. but it is not. The question becomes, what is the alternative? I often get the question, why do black people embrace a tradition that was used to oppress them? Why would black people embrace a tradition that was used to oppress them? And lots of my atheist and humanist colleagues raise that question, drop the mic, that's it, right? Game over, we have won, boom, what you gonna say? Yeah? But for me, that misses three things. One, it doesn't appreciate the complexity of black theism. That critique misses a Frederick Douglass. It misses a Nat Turner. It misses a Gabriel Prosser. It misses an Ida B. Wells. It misses a Bethune-Cookman. Yeah, it's more complex than that. That there were some black theists who understood that tradition to require them to do something in the world, to make a difference in the world. Secondly, it doesn't recognize that non-theists have been involved in anti-black racism. Right? We tend to move through the world as if disbelief is a prophylactic against stupidity, and it is not. Right? That humanism has been deeply embroiled in anti-black racism. Think about the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment involves the kind of intellectual inquiry, a robust sense of our humanity, our place in the world, but it also supported and added sophistication to anti-blackness. Even in the context of the United States, I don't know very many humanists or atheists who don't embrace Thomas Jefferson. Right? Yay, Jefferson. But as soon as humanists and atheists embrace Thomas Jefferson, they're embracing slavery and sexual violence. So that question about black folks being involved in Christianity has to be partnered with the question of how our humanism has served to belittle. Third, for me, the better question is, why hasn't humanism been more attractive to people of a despised color? Right? Why hasn't it been more attractive? And it seems to me it has not been more attractive because we've been slow to recognize the need for humanist communities as a soft place to land. That is to say that these communities have to involve more than a critique of theism. These folks are looking for something else. They already know the shortcomings of the church, of the mosque, right? They already know. What else do we give them? And that something we give them has to involve a different set of relationships, of connections, a different way of processing the joys and the sorrows of life, a different way to think about community formation, relationships formation, because a lot of these folks are going to lose family and friends. And coming and only hearing a critique of theism doesn't get them new friends, doesn't get them new family. Right? So it's got to be a soft place to land. And again, by that I mean it's got to be a space that gives them the emotional, the psychological, the affective connections that they no longer get from theist communities and families. If we don't do that, stop asking the question, why don't we have more black and brown people? Just don't ask the question, right? Because if we're not doing that heavy lifting and creating spaces that are soft places to land and we're asking that question, it's disingenuous. It's as if asking the question is enough, right? Pat ourselves on the back because we're asking the question. We're woke, right? But if we're not going to do that heavy lifting, don't ask the question.
So instead of just bad-mouthing religion, separation of church and state, and science talks, it has to be a robust and meaningful community aspect to what we offer as a soft place to land.
It's got to be. If we're talking about growth, if we're interested in growth, then we have to provide an alternative. Right? And separation of church and state, wonderful conversation. This is important. Science education, of course. But that is not
But it's missing
enough.
this, yeah. And what I have understood through the years of listening to Dr. Pinn's talks and other talks is that he's not going to have the answers for everybody. It's up to us as Oasis to figure out what that answer is. How do we offer a better community for, again, secular humanists generally and black humanists and atheists specifically? That's up to us to figure out. So I'm kind of asking that, making sure that doesn't come up as a Q&A before later. And while we're on that topic, I'm going to go ahead and also preemptively ask a question. And I'd rather do it than it come from the audience, because I've heard that go sideways many times. We're already Oasis. Why does there have to be a black Oasis? Why does there have to be a black humanist group?
I get this question a lot.
I
get
know.
it all the time. And I think over the years I've gotten better at answering it, in part because I've heard it enough that I'm not angry about the question anymore.
Yeah.
And so, first thing I would say is, we are not really creating black humanism. We are recognizing its long existence. That as long as there have been black folks in what becomes the United States, there has been disbelief. Wasn't named humanism, right? That's a 20th century naming, but the sensibilities, the posture towards the world is present for as long as black folks have been present. And so in my work, I'm simply describing and surfacing what has been present. Within the context of our communities, you are simply acknowledging, recognizing, and welcoming humanists who come from a long-standing practice of these sensibilities. Not making it, just recognizing that these folks have always been present. Part of the problem with humanism in the United States has been the assumption that it has recently created blacks who get this, right? That this is a recent development. Black people are finally getting to know. We've been doing this for a minute. You just didn't recognize it, yeah? So it's a matter of recognizing the complexity, the diversity that is already and always a part of our human experience, and coming up with ways in our practice, in our conversation, to recognize and reflect that diversity, that complexity that has always been there.
We have about 2 minutes left, and that question, by the way, is asked and answered. That I did earlier. Drop the mic. We have about 2 minutes left before we can take a break and then have Q&A. We're going to have Q&A after the coffee break. As a medical doctor, my outlook has always been outcomes driven. I have to have the best outcomes for what I do. That's been my life. But in my activism, again, you've kind of taught me that you can't be outcomes driven, especially as an atheist activist in Texas. I will burn out if I'm worried about outcomes. And instead, you describe it as a persistence of possibilities. Again, we have 2 minutes to unpack it. But I've heard you say in the past, and this totally changed my aspect and made me a better activist, that my man here is a big fan of philosophy and Camus. I'm going to shorten it to say, he kind of says at the end of these sentences, imagine Sisyphus happy. This guy rolling this boulder up the hill, and it's never going to happen, but he is happy doing it. And I still get chills saying that. I mean, it has totally changed my outlook, and it made me a better activist. So hope versus persistence of possibilities. We got 2 minutes.
I think for non-believers, outcome-driven strategies aren't available to us. That it's a misrepresentation of our philosophy of life to assume that we can have outcome-driven strategies. I get this with theists because they don't labor alone. God is on the throne and all is well, right? Where we fall short, there is God. So they can have outcome-driven strategies because there's something other than them pressing this. And human history, what human history teaches, that narrative is not the end of the story for them. For us, this is different. What we know is confined to the workings of human history. And human history suggests that as soon as we get something right, we're going to find a way to get it wrong. That we have not resolved any of these issues. Yeah? And so we need a very different approach. I think non-theists ought to be much more comfortable with uncertainty than theists are. I think there's a lot to learn from people like Albert Camus, W.E.B. Du Bois, who, before going to Ghana, and I'm going to say this quickly, before going to Ghana, he's writing to a friend, and he says this to this friend: chin up, fight on, knowing the Negro. Chin up, fight on, knowing the Negro can't win. Fight on, knowing the Negro can't win. That's a very different strategy. That is not an outcome-driven strategy. That is not the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so learning from these folks, and I would throw in there someone like Zora Neale Hurston, who argues that prayer is for the weak, right? You do what you can, but prayer is for the weak, right? Throw these folks in, and what we have, rather than outcome-driven strategies, is a very different perspective on struggle. That in struggle, in and of itself, is a victory. Something about our struggle speaks to our firm commitment to the integrity of life. That's a win. That at the end of the day, we may not ultimately change any of this nastiness, but through our persistent struggle, we approach injustice with a firm no that increases with volume and tenacity. And at the end of the day, we may not end any of these forms of nastiness, but we can make it more difficult to normalize them, and that's a win. The victory is in struggle. And so I agree with Camus. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, and that's enough.
Thank you, brother. Got chills again. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for an amazing conversation. I think we all have gotten a lot to think about, learned a lot. We're going to go into a 10-minute coffee break. So we'll be back here. Enjoy conversation, meeting each other. There is coffee outside. There are probably some snacks outside. And for those of you who have not yet registered to vote, Will would be more than happy to take that if you are eligible to vote. Yes?
October 7th, I believe, is a Monday, is the last day to register if you want to get in this election.
Everybody heard that? October 7th is the last day to register to vote. Yeah. In this upcoming election. So it is, change comes from voting, meaning comes from making a difference, meaning is in life. Thank you all. Let's have some coffee.
Whether you're Kojic or AME, there are some fundamentals of that God relationship that remain in place. One would be the theological anthropology, that is to say, the nature and meaning of the human. That whether you're Kojic or AME or National Baptist, there is a low anthropology, that is to say, a low opinion of the human. That the human is fundamentally flawed, incapable, only able to get where they need to go based upon grace. Whether you're Kojic or AME, there is the problem of evil, or theodicy, as theologians put it. What can you say about God in light of human suffering in the world? Regardless of the denomination, theism provides an inadequate response. And black folks who find this response inadequate might move to humanism or atheism, right? That regardless of the denominational thrust, what you get is the assumption that suffering is either divine punishment, or it's pedagogical, or it's mystery, right? That we have done something wrong and God's got to slap us around to get us right, or it's a matter of God using this moment to transform us. And this was popular even with radical nationalist black ministers like Henry McNeil Turner, who in 1895 in Atlanta, Georgia, argued that God is a Negro. 1895 in Atlanta, Georgia. It's the same year, same location that Booker T. Washington gives his famous or infamous speech, depending on your perspective. He argues God is a Negro. Long before football players are taking a knee, he argued that the U.S. flag is a dirty rag and will remain so until black folks are treated right. But he also said, look, the slavery thing, this was supposed to be a temporary schooling, that God allowed the enslavement of Africans to introduce them to the Christian faith, civil forms of government, and they were supposed to take this back to Africa. The problem is what God intended as a temporary schooling process, white folks tried to make permanent, and they will pay for this, right? But again, you get this sense of responding to moral evil in the world in a way that denigrates and reduces the significance, the importance, the beauty of our humanity. And for a whole lot of black folks, enough of that. And so the particular denomination wouldn't matter because they all had a very similar response to this issue of moral evil. What can you say about God? And for the last thing on this, and for a whole lot of black folks, the question was, the way they answered this was, what you can say is, if there is a God, this God doesn't like black people. Right? Because if you look at history, white folks seem to do really well. Now, you can talk in terms of individual white people, but as a group, have done fairly well. So if there is a God, God likes those folks and doesn't like us. And you can make that argument biblically. Pharaoh was trying to let the folks go. And God said, no, I'm going to harden his heart because I'm about to show you something. I'm going to show you my power, so I'm going to harden his, right? God in the Hebrew Bible picks and chooses. Maybe this God hadn't picked black folks. And so lots of black folks raised that question. The only way to satisfy themselves with respect to that was say, I'm out.
And put it on a blues record.
So I recently read someone who described churches in the United States as the primary sociological institution. Former evangelical pastor, I led my last church to grow from 500 to 2,000 members. I've spoken in scores of churches across the U.S. and in other countries. Left the faith 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And as I look back now and I think about that growth we experienced and I think about all the churches I was in, a lot of what was happening was probably more about sociology and psychology, or at least as much so as theology. And I would like your reaction to what I'm saying here, because I think I'm saying something similar, but feel free to disagree. So if that's true, and churches, as strong as they are largely about community and sociology and psychology, and then we as secular communities across the country, because of our bad experiences with religion, anything that our group starts to do that looks too religious, we say no. And in Houston, 7 million people, probably 2 million nuns, N-O-N-E-S's. do we react reflexively to religious things at our peril if we want to grow? And part two of the question, if we're going to be a soft place to land, can we do it with all our chairs pointed in the same direction every week? Thank you.
So I'm not one of those secular humanists who is trying to close down churches, mosques, and synagogues. I'm not interested in padlocking them. And I think folks have a right to do what they want to do with their Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. My concern is that what they do on their Friday, Saturday, or Sunday should not determine the public dimensions of my life. So I'm not interested in shutting them. So, and I'd also, again, push that the concern for me is not religion, it's theism. And I think on some level you are correct in terms of what is happening within churches. The question has become, how do you grow in a context in which you cannot assume generational commitment? One way to do that is to revive the connection to economics, for example. Right? It's always been in place. My enslaved ancestors who embraced theism sung about the streets of heaven being paved with gold and all God's children having shoes to wear. There's stuff that goes along with this commitment. Right? And the way in which this gets expressed over the past, 50, 60 years is the prosperity gospel. And that is about how do you understand this religious commitment in light of the American dream? How do you tangle those together? Theology is a second-order enterprise. It's never primary. Theology follows on the heels of activity, of experience. It's a way of naming. It's a way of describing experience. It's secondary. And so these churches have learned that if you can downplay the disruptive dimensions of this secondary enterprise theology and highlight all the stuff that folks are concerned with and demonstrate how their theism gets them this stuff, you got to win. Right, so you have a T.D. Jakes who's not really concerned with the finer points of theology, or a Creflo Dollar, right, or Joel Osteen. Not really concerned with the fine points of theology. How do you take this experience and make it applicable to life Monday through Saturday? You do it economically.
So I just want to know about your choice of language on the title of your book, because I think language matters. And you do say the black practice of disbelief, and that's different than non-belief. So given what you're saying about religion, and I think I am getting it. I was sort of raised Presbyterian, so I kind of know a little bit about what that feels like. But it is kind of interesting that it's I see that as a more active positioning. And
Yeah.
just wonder what you have to say about that.
Yeah, it's a more active positioning. And I think for me and for my editor, it also encouraged a kind of dissonance that might generate curiosity. And so the press and the editor are more concerned with sales. My attitude is I need to say what I think is truthful and meaningful, and the rest is not up to me. And so with the title, for me, it was a way of being clear with respect to what I think is at stake, and that there is something active in what we're doing, and proactive, not simply reactive, that this isn't simply a shaking of the fist at churches. It's proactive, right? It's carving out a way of being regardless of what is taking place over here.
One last question.
There seems to be a whole lot of white Christians that don't seem to know that Jesus was a black guy about 5 feet tall.
Yeah. But sadly, there are a whole lot of folks of a despised color who assume that Jesus was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, right? And that part of this is what Frederick Douglass gets at with internalized racism, that folks of a despised color have a difficult time imagining what is perceived as best in the universe, the best representation of humanity, as looking like them, as reflecting them. And so you had a whole lot of black folks in churches with a stained glass window, with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. Now, some of this I get, because they were buying churches in the inner city when white folks moved to the suburbs. And those churches were what those churches were. But you also have black folks building churches. And in those churches, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. Right? So for me, this is significant, that this says something about our inability to recognize the vibrant and vital nature of our humanity, that we represent what is best about life. Right? It looks like us.
All right, y'all. A huge applause for Dr. Pinn. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really loved listening to your thoughts, insights, and getting to think a little bit and question some of my things. We're going to move on to a couple more pieces of music before we close out. Lexi, Augusto, take it away.
So we're going to, again, we're really excited to be here. We're going to end today's performance with two short things. One is another classical era piece by Telemann. He was a German composer of the 1700s. And the last thing is kind of a more fun thing that we really like doing, which is playing maybe less classical genres on our classical instruments. So we'll be playing one of Mike's favorite things. Hey, Mike. Por una cabeza. Cool.
That was amazing. Lexi, Augusta, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your beautiful music with us. This brings our wonderful program to a conclusion. I do have a few additional announcements. As I mentioned earlier today is Bring Your Own Lunch, so we'll be staying here. As we're reconfiguring the room, please feel free to help with putting chairs off to the side, stacking them no more than 5 to a stack, otherwise it'll topple over, and getting out a few of the round tables for us to gather around lunch. Also, we are putting together an Oasis cookbook. So there's a few folks on the fundraising team. I'm not sure whether Emily is here today. Tim, yes. So what we want to do is not just share our food with each other while we're here, but we also want to share the recipes with you all. We'll put this cookbook together for a fundraising opportunity for us. Please go ahead and send us your recipe. You only have another 8 days to do so. We need them by October 1st in order to have them ready have a wonderful cookbook ready for you all. You can email me at verena@houstonoasis.org, or you can hand me or Emily the typed up recipe as well. But we would love to include as many recipes as we can from you all. So please do that. Another request, Tish is doing a community moment on Oasis pets. If you would like your pet to be included in that presentation, email her at, I think it's somewhere in the thing, tishperez@gmail.com. She'll just need a couple of pictures of your pets, maybe the names, and she'll have a wonderful community moment ready for us. Again, also that deadline is also October 1st, so please go ahead and email those things to her as well. If you have anything happening in your life that you need help with, Houston Oasis has a care team. We've been pretty active helping out community members with moves, with procuring certain things that they might need. Feel free to email, I think it's just careteam@houstonoasis.org, Terry? care@houstonoasis.org, or find any one of us board members, and we'll be happy to figure out how we can best come together to help you. Next week, we have a community moment by Jennifer to talk about events. Community is important. It's not just today, it's not just on Sunday. So we do rely on folks in our community to say, hey, I would really love to organize a get-together on Wednesday night doing X, Y, and Z. So she'll be talking a little bit about that. How does that look like? If you want to participate in a book club or a card game, there are the Oasis Cards, I think, meets every Saturday, and but you do need to let Jennifer or Richard know ahead of time. Richard's in the back there, richard@houstonoasis.org. He'll get you more information just so to be sure that they have the right number of folks for cards. And then Ted organizes the Houston Oasis Book Club, and they'll be meeting September 25th on West Gray at the Cafe Express. So the book this week is The Only Woman in the Room by Marie Benedict. So all of this information is in your bulletin as well as on our website. If you go to the website, houstonoasis.org, there is an events page there as well. And main talk next week is by Keith Thompson, who will present on reproductive freedom is religious freedom. Music is still TBD. Also for folks who have children, or if you know folks who have children who'd love to come, we do have a kids room. It is staffed with individuals who are used to working with kids, and they typically have a number of fun kids activities, so please make sure folks are aware of that. Just one more request. None of this is possible without us having the ability to rent the room, pay speakers, pay musicians, etc. So there are a number of different ways to contribute. Listed on the back side here. Check, Tim, our treasurer, is in the back as well. More than happy to take your contribution. If that's not something that's in your budget currently, don't worry about it. We love to have you here, love to have you participate, and also love all of our volunteers who are spending hours upon hours putting everything together. Thank you all for being here today. Let's have lunch.